Okay, we're going to look at a problem a student had questions about, and this is the particular problem, and I'm going to work each one of these just to show you. Obviously here we know P is 0.6 and N is 6, and we need the probability of X equals 2. So we'll start with that. So let's talk about what we know. We know X equals 2, or we want to find the probability of X equal 2, and we know N equals 6, and we know that P is 0.6. So the best thing to do is get your information, and then P and Q have to add up to 1. So the probability of success is 0.6, and the probability of failure would be 1 minus 0.6, which is 0.4. So now we can use our formula, and we're going to find the probability that X equals 2. And if you look at your formula, the top is N factorial, which N is 6. And then the bottom is N minus X factorial. So you would have 6 minus 2 factorial. And then the final part is X factorial, which is 2 factorial. So we're going to work this out, and you can try to do this in your calculator, or use what you know about the shortcuts. If you have a factorial on the top and the bottom that is exactly the same, then you can cancel out. So 6 minus 2 is 4 factorial. So we have a 4 factorial and a 2 factorial. So what I need to do with the top is I need to get 6 times 5 and get down to a factorial that I know can cancel out. And now we have canceled that out. And I forgot to finish my formula up here. So we're going to have P times P to the X, which is 2, and then times Q, which is 0.4, and then N minus X, so 6 minus 2, which would be 4. So if you plug it in right, that's the hardest part really, is putting everything in the right place. So we end up with, let's just go ahead and bring this down. So you end up with 30 right here, and then 2 times 1, because 2 factorial means 2 times, and keep going down, so 1. So 30 divided by 2 is 15. So 15 times 0.6 to the second times 0.4 to the fourth. So what you need to do is, if you have a TI-83 or a TI-84, you can put all of this in at one time, and that really helps. Or you could do 15 times 0.6 squared and see what that is, and write that number down. But it's easier if you have a TI-83 or 84 calculator that you can put all of this in at one time. So once you do that, you're going to get a long number probably, but we're going to round to the 4th decimal place. And the key to this for homework is, when you're doing the formula, don't round until the very end when you get your probability number. So the probability of X equaling 2 is 0.1382. Notice the next part is the probability of X equal to 1 or less than 1. So the only options you would have there is equal to 1, and the only number that you could use less than 1 would be 0. So we're going to have to find, it's like two problems in one. We're going to have to find the probability of x equaling 1 and the probability of x equaling 0. And then we're going to have to add those two probabilities together. So let's go back here. And this time, we're going to change x equals 2 to x equals 1. So x is going to equal 1. So this is going to change. And then everywhere we see a 2, the 6 is not going to change. We're going to put a 1. Now, the exponent here is going to change. The 2 is going to change to 1. And instead of it being 6 minus 2 here, it's going to be 6 minus 1 here. So that would be 5, sorry. This number and this number should always add up to 6 because n is 6. So see how these two probabilities, 0.6 and 0.4, add up to 1, and then your exponent should always add up to whatever n is. So that might help you a little bit if you can just make a note of that. I don't expect you to remember that, but the p and the q always add up to 1. The exponents should always add up to whatever n is. Just make a note of that. Okay, so now we can work this. 6 factorial is, first of all, we're going to get 5 on the bottom. So we need the top to 5 factorial. We need the top to go down to 5. So we can cancel the bottom and the top out. So that's gone. And 1 factorial is just 1. So 6 over 1 is just 6. So we end up with, basically, we're going to end up with 6 times 0.6 to the first times 0.4 to the fifth. Now, if you have a TI-83 or a TI-84, to do an exponent, you can use this little rooftop, is what I call it, and you put 0.4 rooftop 5 to put your exponents in. Anyway, when you multiply all of that out, you will get, let me see what I got. I believe I got 0.0369. So we need to remember that number. Okay, so we're going to add that in a minute to our probability of x equaling 0. So we're going to change x to 0. So everywhere you see a 1, you're going to change the 1 to a 0. So now 0 plus what equals 6? This has to change to a 6. And now we're going to work it out again. Now I'm not going to erase the 0.0369 because we know that's the probability of x equaling 1. So now let's work this. And this one's super easy because watch what happens. We get 6 factorial on the top. Ooh, got a little excited. We get 6 factorial on the top, and you get 6 factorial on the bottom, and 0 factorial. 0 factorial is just 1. So basically, you end up with 1 over 1, which is 1, and anything to the 0 power is 1. So basically, anything to the 0 power is 1. So basically, we end up with 1 times 0.4 to the 6th power. So basically, 0.4 to the 6th power will be what we need to put in the calculator. And that is going to end up rounding to 0.0041. So the probability that x is less than or equal to 1 is the probability of x equaling 1 plus x equaling 0. These two probabilities added together. So if you add those two together, I believe we ended up getting 0.041. So that is our answer. Now for this last one, probability of x is greater than 4. Well, first of all, our values only go up to 6. So we would find the probability of x equaling 5 and the probability of x equaling 6, just like we did in B, except with different numbers here. X is 5 and x is 6. Once we get those probabilities, we're going to add those together just like we did in B.